Good morning and welcome to the sixth. My, haven't the weeks gone quickly? The Monday, which is now Monday midday mini fest. So we're recording this at 12 o'clock on a Monday the whatever we are, 16th of March, and we're here talking about plots. So we did do plotting and pantsing a few weeks ago. David was in this, and he will be talking about the variation of plotting and pantsing that he does. He has his own special term for it. So we'll be talking about that. But we're going to start off with Cristina. So we're all here in the UK, not a million miles away from each other. David's up the M1, M6, Birmingham, or however you like to come south. And then we have Cristina and Denise closer to me in Aylesbury, neighbouring counties, and Buckinghamshire. So Cristina, welcome. Do
Thank
tell
you.
us about you and your writing and your plotting.
Right. I wrote a novel, Lucifer's Game, a World War II thriller, a few years ago already. And I love thrillers. So I got into writing because I discovered a mini story, really. And I started to think about how did that happen. So it's an historical document that I was reading, and it was about um, an English spy which went undercover in Italy and managed to steal some secret that helped to defeat Rommel in North Africa. So I always wanted to write a novel, and but from your own wishes to actually producing something which is about 300 pages long, it's it's quite a challenge. So what I did was to start asking myself some questions. So you start any novel with a basic idea. A basic idea is something that can be summarized in one sentence. So in this case, a British spy goes undercover in Italy and steals some, military secrets. Very easy. But then how do you tell that story? So what I did was to basically use my journalistic abilities and start asking some questions. So by asking some questions, you have some answers, and each answer, if you like, is a piece of the story. So I asked myself, who is this guy? Where did they find him? Who was his boss? Uh, did he get trained or was he naturally gifted? And then how did he land into Italy? Did he go by train, by parachute? And then how did he get into, the fascist command? Was he helped or did it, he did everything by himself? So basically, I fleshed out the story in mini answers, if you like, and you've got a sort of initial skeleton, if you like. And then and that's important because for me the plot is something that I write before even putting pen to paper. It's because my background, if you like, in terms of corporate communication, where you have to have a plan. And when you have a plan, you have a start, the middle, and the end. And so I knew how the story started. I knew how the story ended. The bit in the middle was a bit fun, foggy
Sure.
at the time. But by providing the answers that I was talking about before,
Mm.
you sort of, start to do these mini steps that will bring you to the end. It's think about plotting like organizing a journey. You know where you start. You know where you want to go to Madrid or Johannesburg or whatever, and so you have to plan all the steps in between. And two things which are really important in a story, and for me in a thriller, it's adding some dramas because you have, especially in a thriller, to be changing the story or making the story more interesting every 6 to 8 pages. Otherwise, your typical reader is going to get bored. So adding the dramas and the story turns was really important. So by having a plan, you can see where the dramas are, you can plan the dramas, and you can also see where the story goes too slow or too fast. And it's very important also to pace the story at the right speed, really. So that's a sort of thing that I did, and I ended up writing about 30 pages. So it was sort of novel in a pot.
Mm.
Um, and that gave me also the opportunity to sort of choose my cast of characters, because obviously the story is carried by, the characters in them. And it for me to choose who were the protagonist meant that they had to be, people who had some motivations and also some fears. And by exploiting both, you can see, the challenges and how they react. So it's it's a sort of interactive job in fact, to write a story and to choose the characters, because they are part of the same thing.
Mm.
But having a plot on a piece of paper, and actually I write an Excel, which is terrible if you write for a writer, but an Excel spreadsheet gives me um, all the chapters and what goes into each chapter in one single view.
Right.
And this way I can see, oh, the story is interesting or the story is not interesting.
Mm.
Now,
But as an Excel spreadsheet nerd,
Mm.
I love the idea actually of having your plan in a. I misheard you. I thought you actually wrote the whole novel in an Excel spreadsheet.
I did not the whole thing. No, no, no,
No,
just the
no,
plan.
just
No,
the
no, I would
yes.
be. Oh, I'm not that mad.
No, I did wonder, but I like the fact that you have these questions, because I do a podcast called 300 Words a Day, and there's a new episode every day, because it's my favorite statistic. 300 words a day is 109,500 words a year. So, and I use that as the basis. So every day I give a new prompt, and I'm up to 100 and 230 something episodes, and I give a prompt, and then I say the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and and that's really, I think, from if you're a pantser, I recommend having the who, what, the answers to who, at least most of them, who, what, where, when, why, and how, and even if it ends up just being a page and that's it, because it does give you some framework. I'll talk about me later, but I've become a plantser. So I didn't plot, I just got an idea and ran with it. But now I do a bit of planning, because I find I got stuck more too often with no form of plan. So yeah, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Gotta love
I've
them.
I've used an Excel spreadsheet.
Have you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Particularly something I was co-writing that needed a lot more organization than just doing it yourself, I guess.
right. Because some people use Scrivener, which has, and I have done in the past. One of my editing clients wanted me to use Scrivener, so he bought me the package, and I did use it. But I find Word for the actual writing. Word is more user friendly, and when you send it off somewhere or you submit it to Amazon or whatever, it tends to need to be in Word.
Yeah.
David,
Yes.
you go about planning your books in a slightly different way.
Well, you talked about yourself being a plantser, but in fact, I think most people are hybrid of some description. You do some planning and then you do stuff by the seat of your pants, or you start off just discovery writing. That's what we're supposed to say.
Yeah.
Discovery writing, and then we get in a bit of a mess, so we go to some sort of theory or something to plan things.
Mm.
I've done all three methods. So the other Christmas Carol I wrote, um, I was stage managing in the Tamworth Snowdome. So we used to arrive in the freezing cold, go into the warmed reception area, then go
Right.
into the Snowdome. Then we had a green room that was warmed inside. And inside the green room, we had a fridge for our milk. It seemed ludicrous because you just lived outside in the
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah.
And I was going slowly insane doing the same show every 20 minutes. So I took my laptop in to do some writing, but I couldn't do any writing because you start to tune everything out.
Mm.
And I had to wait to press a vital button for a lighting change or whatever. So I just started in my head to plan this story, and typed it up as a single screen of bullet points. I did that for 27 days. Right, it was a Christmas story. I thought I'd write this story in the 12 days of Christmas, but I did it in about two. It just poured out really quickly because I had done so much planning. I knew it all in my head. The bullet points were almost just a written down guide to remind me. And it is certainly the way I would recommend how you should write. Plan it, then write it. I don't have the patience to do that, sadly. So I just start writing stuff. But I did the first book I wrote was purely pants. It was Reninko. I just started with, Once Upon a Time and kept going until I got to And They Lived Happily Ever After. And that ran into sort of problems of going around in circles, or it took a while to write up to speed. Now I'm a puzzler, which is not my term. I was desperately trying to come up with a way of describing it. It began with P. It had, pants as plotters, puzzler. But I found it online, and that's where I just write random stuff and then try to puzzle it all together.
Okay.
You just get into a mess, basically.
But then you could always come up with useful things that won't necessarily fit that book, but is interesting for other things.
Yeah, they all have their advantages and disadvantages, don't they?
Yeah.
Puzzling, at least you're writing a thing when you're inspired to write it. If you want to write the car chase now, well, write the car chase now. And don't write the boring bit about them going to hire a car. Do that later.
Yeah. Well, I despair if I see on Facebook, I wrote 10,000 words yesterday, read them again this morning and they were rubbish, so I deleted them. Just think, there's got to be either if it's really not good, it's workable, or rewrite it. But if it doesn't fit the book, then keep it, put it somewhere else for something else.
Well, I have a chapter called The Cutting Room Floor, where I just take stuff and put it. I can't just cut it, but I move it to there, and then eventually it ends up in another file. So I've got other series. I do the Deer and Do Club series, and I'm writing one at the moment. And my file of stuff I've deleted and taken out is about 26,000 words.
Wow.
Which is inefficient, isn't it? So you should plot. The snowflake method is probably the best I've come across, which is you write a single sentence of what your plot is about. So it's a spy thriller of somebody going into Italy. That would be one. And then you write that as a paragraph, so 4 sentences. He is recruited. He sneaks into Italy. He does, so just a paragraph. And then the next day, so you're supposed to spend a whole day on your first sentence. Then you spend a day on this paragraph. Then the next day you write it again, but as 4 paragraphs. So with a bit more detail. And then you write those 4 paragraphs each as a page. So you're gradually exploding out what you're doing. And if you hit the stack,
this sounds like Dawn with her poetry. Writing a sentence one day, David's partner, writing a sentence one day and then 4 sentences. Then I don't know how she works, but we've had this conversation before in our 2 hours, 23 minutes and 53 seconds spotlight the other day, which is now another number seared into my brain. Yes, we're talking about Dawn and her poetry.
Well, this snowflake method is if you hit a snag, you go back a stage.
Right.
So that you're always working with a plan or a plot that makes sense and is coherent.
Yeah.
Or you could just say the plot is what the villain does. As they sit in their secret lair and go, I'm going to steal an atom bomb or something. So you've then got what the villain is going to do, and then it's up to the hero to try to stop that person. And that's a way of plotting.
Denise, welcome. Unfortunately, we don't have Denise on camera today. So we're missing out on her hairdo and her makeup.
Yes.
But hopefully we'll get that sorted for the next panel. Morning, Denise. Afternoon.
Hi.
Pardon. 12:20.
Hi.
Do tell us about you. Anybody who's viewed previous panels will know Denise and David. And from Denise was my first author spotlight. back in the day. I think it was last August we started those, and David is one of the more recent ones. Denise, do introduce yourself, and your plotting or pantsing method.
Thanks, Morgan. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
good. That's small mercy. So yes, I started out pantsing and ended up doing a bit of both, plotting and pantsing. But the worry is if you just pants, you might turn out pants, you know. But yes, I write true crime, which obviously the plot is usually there. You fully explore it and you add your own research and maybe come to different conclusions, whether someone should have been hanged or not. I write a series of thrillers, espionage thrillers, and those are a mixture of personal experience, countries I've lived in, and situations I've lived through, and wondered whether that would make a good story. And then I do cozy crime series as well. And that's because it's set locally here in the Chalfonts in Buckinghamshire, where I live. So essentially, I look for local incidents and I tie things in that I know will appeal to local people. For example, with the thrillers, one I've written a series of 6 so far. I've got another 2 in draft. But the Kohat connection is based in Pakistan and was involved in something I was often asked to do, which was to accompany the UK consul to the local mortuaries to help identify a dead body believed to be a Brit. Because one of my skills and something I trained other people in was facial recognition techniques. So just because some British chap has gone bungee jumping in the Karakorums and has Joe Bloggs' passport in his pocket, it doesn't necessarily mean he is Joe Bloggs. So I had to go along and look at somebody's mangled remains, hopefully able to see enough of the face to compare it with the image in the passport to say to the consul, in my opinion, this is Joe Bloggs, before they actually notify Joe Bloggs' grieving family. So I always wondered what would happen. When I saw the state of these mortuaries, I thought, how chaotic they are. How do they ever get the right body in the right coffin to the right family? And so my story came about as to what would happen where the Stockport housewife goes to the local mortuary to look at the body of her husband who's died in Pakistan, flown back, been repatriated, only to find it's not him. And it involves MI6 and MI5 and a whole load of conspiracies going on. Whereas with local ones, for example, we've had it here in this peaceful Misbourne Valley, we've nevertheless had a few unsolved murders. And we've had a few other outrageous things like 2 winters where the valley has been flooded, the villages have been closed, and the floodwater was found to be contaminated. So, of course, in my story, it's contaminated with something far worse than sewage. Because there are things far worse than sewage. And also I like to bring in local people who might just recognise themselves, even if their names are changed. So a bit like with the Marlow Murder Club, mine's the Misbourne Murder Mysteries. And I've utilised my friends and colleagues from my University of the Third Age local history group. Those are all my characters. They go about solving murders, much to the chagrin of the local head of CID, who'd really rather they just stayed at home with a cup of cocoa and a biscuit. So I plot it all out by, as I say, I'll have a basic idea of which way the story's going because it's usually based on something that's happened. And for example, with the thrillers, I've been reading in the last few weeks about a journalist who, in a Central European country, his career wasn't going very well and he'd had a very unhappy upbringing and the wife left him and so on. And suddenly he starts writing about murders and his accounts of the murders and his suggestions as to what has happened are uncannily accurate. And of course, it's going to turn out that he's actually committing the murders in order to pursue his career. So I thought that's as good a plot as any. I'll work around that.
You have to thoroughly research your stories, don't you? So really, if you're going to write murder mysteries, you have to commit the murders.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. And of course, there's never any shortage of people that I'd like to murder. So it's also fun looking for new methods, isn't it? Poisons, particularly things that don't appear to be poisons, things that you might have on your on your bathroom shelf and what have you that can be used to murder someone. And I always think, and I always say this, that if ever I get arrested and the police look at my internet search history, I'm probably going to be in big trouble. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of way I do the plotting and planning is, and just like with Cristina, you have to make sure your plot isn't sagging anywhere, your story, and if you think it is, then just throw in another dead body and see if that'll entertain people. I don't do Excel spreadsheets, but I do find a little cardboard index file is very useful, because particularly when you're doing a series, you need continuity with characters and locations. And as I get older, I tend to forget people's names. And I'm very mindful that Ian Rankin got a shed load of correspondence for his book 6 or something when he had a character who was a policeman who'd actually been killed off in book 1. So you've got to keep a record of what people look like, whether they're still alive.
I would really reinforce that. I'm very bad at keeping my series Bible up to date. And one of my fans sent me an Excel spreadsheet with all sorts of facts, but I go and refer to that very often.
Okay. See, an editor's job, my ping, Ian Rankin's editor should have picked that up.
Yeah, I should have done.
I have the list of, so when I'm editing a book of my, not so much of my own, but certainly client books, I have a notes document which has everything about all the characters. Anytime something new is mentioned or when they're killed off, it goes in that, dies in chapter whatever. So that if then characters are replicated in later books, they appear in the next set of notes, so that it's always consistent. But yeah, editor should have picked that up. Yeah, because the trouble is, readers will always pick it up, and you don't want an Amazon review that says such and such, because you can't do anything about it. Then it's on Amazon, and they won't take off the review. Denise, do you find it easier to write, easier to plan, to plot your true crime because it's true? I mean, this may be an obvious question. Or your fiction because it may be based on your career or facts that you're aware of, but because when you write true crime, it's all true. Do you find one easier to plot than the other, or not noticeable?
I think it's probably, I mean, I love both sort of genres equally. When I'm writing true crime, I think, oh, this is what I should be writing. I really love this. This is fulfilling. And then when I go back to writing espionage, I think, oh no, this is me. This is my genre. But yeah, it obviously is slightly easier when you know how a case, what happened, and you know the outcomes. I think what you do need to plan there is to plan your approach to it. And I found myself getting a little formulaic. I'll often have a lot of my chapters beginning with the incident, right. The arrest, the other suspects, the trial and the outcome and what happened next to all the people concerned. But a lot of people write to me and say, we like that approach. A lot of true crime will finish with, the usual ending, the person's been executed or gone to prison for life or whatever. Whereas I personally always want to know what happened to the wife, what happened to the bereaved family, what happened to the policeman who I have just demonstrated is plainly corrupt. Did he get his comeuppance? Did he sort of frame other people? So that's how I sort of like to write that.
That's what the audience wants, though, isn't it? That's what you expect in a true crime story. So it's not formulaic in that insulting method. It is what is wanted.
Yes, I think so. I sometimes get quite disappointed when I read true crime books, and they've either gone too much into the sensationalism of the crimes, and they've not given you any indication of the characters. I mean, for example, my book, The Forgotten 44, explores what was officially 22 victims of a US serial killer, Earl Nelson. But in fact, I've demonstrated there were at least twice that number, many of whom did survive, but weren't quite often weren't believed by the police, even though everything about the case is fitted. So, but I wanted to give those victims a voice. I wanted people to know who they were, what kind of lives they had before they were murdered or attacked, and what happened to their families afterwards. And that's where your research comes in. You know, when you discover like that a young crippled boy in America who heard his mother being murdered, what happened to him next? Well, the sad thing is, because the police took in his father and grilled him and beat him up to try and make him confess, the boy was taken to hospital where he died a week later, because he was just heartbroken. He was traumatized and he was heartbroken, and he hadn't got a mum and he didn't know where his dad had gone. And, you know, nobody ever wrote about that. Because, you know, the trauma can go on for generations. And so I like people to feel more for the victims. But I'm always disappointed when a lot of the books about Earl Nelson, for example, they hardly mention the victims. They get the names wrong, the ages wrong. My own ancestor was one of his victims, which got me interested in writing the book and researching it. And one major author, a guy called Green, who's written about the killings, described her as an old woman who probably reminded him of his overly strict grandmother. Well, firstly, she wasn't an old woman. She was 27 and rather beautiful, and she had 2 small children. And she was 7 months pregnant. So he killed her baby as well. And secondly, there isn't the slightest evidence that the killer's grandmother was in any way strict. But I continually see this theme of trying to blame, it has to be a woman involved. You know, either his mother or his grandmother have to be responsible for him being a psychopath, or as a lot of US police chiefs said at the time of the murders in the 1920s, they said, these women have only themselves to blame. Fancy wearing jewellery out in the street. The fact that she wasn't killed in the street, but she was advertising a room to rent and somebody came around to see it and murdered her, you know, doesn't affect their opinion that the women are to blame. So I wanted to get away from the victim blaming, because I get quite angry when I read books that suggest that, you know, it's a bit like the Stephen Port murders, you know, where he killed all these gay young men in the same sort of way and left their bodies in a graveyard. And everyone said, oh, well, that's what happens in the gay community. You know, it's their own fault, really. And that makes me very angry. And I want to look into who these individuals were. So I'm on my high horse now. I better step down.
Well, we will be talking about TV and books and films that other people have written and we see on the screen. I'd
just like to say, I think the trick with true crime or writing a true story is finding the story.
Yes.
So you would agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what is the true story in it? Is it, in fact, I think with the Forgotten 44, the true story is the continued level of incompetence, the medical examiners that wouldn't even recognise somebody had been murdered, that tried to make everything out as suicide or natural causes, the incompetence of the police, who said, well, victims to blame, you know, it's just one of those things. And the fact that individual states' police forces didn't speak to each other. Nobody recognised even that there was such a thing as a serial killer.
But I would call that the theme of your story, the actual structure of the story, you know, where you're going to start telling this tale, where you're going to end.
Yeah, it was actually quite easy with the Forgotten 44 because the guy went on an odyssey across America. He went from the California coast right across to the East Coast, and he went then, you know, having done a big loop, he went up into Canada. And it was British justice in Canada that actually caught up with him and hanged him.
That feels like a result.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he could have gone on forever, I think, if he hadn't gone to Canada. And another facet of the story was that because he was a very strange looking man, he had very mixed ethnic mixture, but not what all the authors think it was. I proved that he was not half Spanish, as people said. He was actually a Jewish guy from Eastern Europe, or his origins were. But the fact was he looked like just about anyone else in American cities. He was short with very dark features and very long arms and big, powerful hands. But he was only about 5'5", 5'6" tall. But when he got to Canada, the area he was in was entirely English, Scottish, and Irish population. And he stood out like the proverbial sore thumb. And everyone was reading in the press about this dark strangler known as the guerrilla strangler, the guerrilla killer in America. And when this guy murders start occurring in Canada, And this guy's walking around. People say that has to be him. He just looks so different. And it was a big mistake he made. And part of it is trying to show how his own choices led to his downfall.
Wow.
I love fiction because you can do whatever you want
Yeah.
with the killers.
Yes. It's interesting you say about this chap. So he was American, the chap who got his facts wrong and was
Yes.
sensationalizing. Yeah, because it made me think of film. I love the Die Hard series, but I think it was the fifth one with his son Bruce Willis and the chap who plays his son John, and they're in a tank. And I love American films. I love English films, but I think that one of the distinctions between the two is that a lot of our films, especially BBC, are more plot concentrated and characters, and they're more about the development of characters. And yes, Die Hard is all about action, but you see a scene where you've got a tank going down a road, and I think it's a high street, and you've got cars parked sideways because that's how they're parked, and the tank is wide enough to get through, but it's hitting all these cars and they're going off like that, and you kind of think, just we want the plot. Just tell us what goes on. We don't need all the bells and whistles thereafter. And I think maybe there is, for certain readerships, perhaps they expect more sort of guts than the actual, perhaps the heart of it.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I mean, the fact is that Earl Nelson was a serial sex killer. He was a necrophile. So his entire reason for killing women and girls was to violate the corpses. And so most authors, they just focus in on that. They want to provide detail that they don't really know existed, but they've got to make it lurid and all the rest of it. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted readers to see these victims as real people, whether it was a schoolgirl or an elderly lady of 69. His victims didn't matter to him.
Or an elderly lady of 27.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny what you say about the tanks and the cars. Why are there so many stacks of empty cardboard boxes on American streets where car chases happen? They're always driving into empty cardboard boxes.
They're very into recycling.
Yeah.
How laudable.
David, do you find, because obviously, I mean, you write things, the saying is write what you know, but do you find, again, it's probably an obvious question, do you find it easier to plan a book based on something that you know about, an interest or experience, than perhaps just get a more vague idea and think, okay, that would make an interesting book?
I make it up as I go along. I definitely make it up as I go along. I think that the advice, write what you know, means we'd all be writing stories about writers doing things. What you have to do is write what you know emotionally. So we've all fallen in love, we've all been angry, we've all felt regret. That's the thing you need to tap into. So you can write about Martians despite the fact that you've never been a Martian.
Yeah.
But they're going to feel angry and sad in the same way that you have. So write what you know emotionally is the advice.
Cristina, you were saying earlier on that you just had an idea and then wrote some bones for it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you think, actually, I know enough about this, then I think it would make an interesting book? Do you think you'd see that differently, or perhaps plan it differently, or?
Well, I'm researching now an idea for a story which is in the year 900, and I know nothing about that. So, and I would repeat the same process I went through for writing my first and the second novel as well. I start with research. Because if I'm interested in a certain historical period, I want to know a lot about it. So I start from non-fiction books. I read a lot of those, actually. So the bulk of my job is actually having a huge research 3-4 months prior to what I need to write. And so that I can sort of plunge myself in that era and know as much as possible. Because I write fiction, I will set my characters against that backdrop. So the backdrop has to be, plausible and believable. But the story doesn't need to be, absolutely precise from an historical perspective. Of course, you're not going to give, any of your characters a mobile phone, because it's not going to, it's not that. But at the same time, you want to transport the reader into an imaginary world. And it's, if you think about the Harry Potter stories, of course they need to feel real, but they're not. So the ability of a writer is that to sort of draw your readers in. But because I love history, I like the fact that I chose in this particular novel that I was talking about before, I chose the Second World War because it was a pivotal moment in European history. So if you choose, for instance, an historical period which is very important for a nation, because it could have gone one way or the other, and in Hitler's case, if Hitler had won the war, we would be all in a very different world now. So that it's quite important. And why is it important? Because the stakes are really high. So for a thriller, stakes need to be really high, because otherwise the tension is not there, and people want to know what happened and I want them to be on the edge of their seat all the time. So by having all these elements in the story, for me, it was absolutely important to make sure that I chose the right historical period as well. And a period which I love, by the way, because otherwise I wouldn't be passionate about it.
No, exactly.
Because it's a mix of all these elements. It's not just one.
Well, it's funny that segues perfectly into I Googled what are the elements of a books. I think I said books plot, but novels plot. So according to a Google search, a book plot is the structured sequence of events driving a story, generally consisting of exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. These elements build tension, develop characters, and resolve conflicts, keeping readers engaged from the initial setup to the final, often transformed, because characters will go on a journey, state. Core elements of a book plot. I've listed this on this session's page, but exposition, it says, is the introduction, so it sets the scene, introduces the characters, etc. Now, exposition, we also is a term I use in editing, because sometimes, and I've seen this often on TV and film, where we know something, the characters know something, but they're discussing it for the benefit of the reader or the viewer. Oh, you won the lottery last week. Can you lend me a tenner? Or about that we went on holiday. And so I say we don't need it. Just show us that this has happened by what follows it. So have it phrase it a different way, that oh, you're so lucky having all that money, or it's not a good example, but I do say if I spot something that is only said because for the reader's benefit, then show it rather than telling us. Inciting incident is the putting your character up a tree and throwing rocks at them. So in the film, I say Fallen, it wasn't Fallen, were Taken with Liam Neeson. The inciting incident, the trigger for him is his daughter's been kidnapped, and he has this. We learn that he has this certain set of skills. And then he's able to go and rescue her. Rising action, the series of obstacles, conflicts, and challenges. Climax, the turning point and highest point of tension where the protagonist confronts the main conflict. Falling action, the immediate aftermath where the story's tension decreases and the consequences of the climax unfold. Resolution, the final outcome where the conflict is resolved, loose ends are tied up, and the new normal is established. And then it mentions conflict, stake, theme, points of view, etc. Now, do you find, David, you've written standalone and series?
Yes, yeah.
Do you find, we will be talking about standalone and series, and there's also a session on endings. But do you find that that it's easier to again, a very broad question, to write a standalone because you just tie everything up, or a series because there are certain points you leave open? Yes, the main plot is tied up.
I've written a standalone that I suddenly came up with 2 sequel ideas for.
Okay.
I think even if you're writing, book 4 of a 6-book series, it still has to stand on its own. So you need to introduce the characters for people who've not read the first books, or for the readers who have read the first books and have forgotten all about them. So you've still got the same job to do. The only difference, I suppose, is you've got to remember whether your policeman died in book 1 or not.
Yeah. And how much detail you give for those who have read it versus how much you give for people who haven't read it.
Yeah.
Just enough, I suppose.
Yes, just enough and no more. Or what's that? It's a matter of taste, isn't it, I think, or your particular voice, how much detail you put. I felt that structural explanation that you gave was somewhat confusing, because all of these schemes tend to use words in different meanings. So you were using resolution there in a way that I know from other schemes I wouldn't use that in that definition. Hook was one I heard, which is the hook the inciting incident, or is it just simply something that happens that gets the reader interested? Well, I've read schemes that use the word hook in both of those senses.
Well, I mean, it hooks. There should be, because you want books to be page turners, and they have your peaks will probably be your hooks, and then your troughs or peaks would be the action, and then your troughs would be your slower, and you need them both. I read A Step on a Crack, which was James Patterson's early collaboration with Michael Letwidge, and he goes from and he probably, he comes up with, apparently the collaborations, he comes up with an idea, the collaborator writes it and then gives it back to him, and he James Patterson's it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But his chapters are alternating from the detective to the villain, to the detective to the villain. So at the end of every chapter, you're literally like this. They're just about to find out something, or they've found out something. What impact does that have? And it was exhausting.
My Deering Do Club books, I wanted to, that it's 3 sisters, Ernestine, Georgina and Charlotte. And I wanted to make sure that one of them didn't take over the story, so they all had a sort of equal amount. So very early on, I sort of started to do an Ernestine, a Georgina, and Charlotte, Ernestine, Georgina, and Charlotte, every chapter. And in the end, I stuck with that because I was going to reorder it, but it was a constraint that forces me to be a little bit more imaginative, but enables me to have cliffhangers all over the place.
Do you write their journey? Because quite often I find it useful to have, just for the main characters, to have their journey, to have a separate section. Right, this is Joe's journey from the start of the book to the end of the book, so I know where, especially if you're threading them in amongst other characters.
I should do that amount of plotting and write that down. I don't. So my advice is you should do what you've just said.
Right. And you could always do it retrospectively, and especially if it's not working, and you think, okay, where's she got to here?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. I've just got to I haven't got to the end properly, but I've gone back to the beginning because now I know how they're going to end up. I need to set up how they're going to start.
Sure.
But in a series, that becomes quite tricky, because if your character starts off with one type of characteristic and learns something in the first book, they've then got to learn something else in the second book and the third book and the fourth book. So, there's only so much characters can learn before they know it all. So that's issue. Yeah, I mean, all of these schemes are based upon the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. This is all about looking at fairy stories and myths. But this is the book that George Lucas had next to him when he was writing Star Wars,
right.
Which is why this all suddenly became very current in Hollywood. Star Wars was somewhat successful, and everybody went, oh, this is the secret to it.
Right.
So you've got people who, this is quite a dry book to read. So people took this idea, this scheme, and changed it ever so slightly to produce stuff like Save the Cat. So this is the famous screenwriting one that A.A. Abbott uses. She was talking about it the other day on this. So this is the screenwriting. Screenwriting theory has developed a lot more than novel writing theory because there's more money in Hollywood.
Right.
If you're writing a novel, you're supposed to suffer in your garret and be inspired by the muses and not bother with all this sort of stuff.
And then somebody else picks it up and writes the screenplay.
This is Save the Cat for novels.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same sort of scheme. But they're all based on the hero's journey and on his research. And I swear by them. You should really know about this sort of stuff. Reading the hero's journey on Wikipedia would be a good place to start to know about this. But we all know these schemes unconsciously because we've all read stories, we've all seen films, so it goes in. And it's surprising when you try to teach this to people. You'll take one of their own stories and they go, I know nothing about the hero's journey. I don't want to write formulaically, they say.
Yeah.
And you analyze the story and it fits it perfectly. Or sometimes it doesn't fit it perfectly. And you go, well, this is why, your middle is a bit flabby, your resolution seems a bit rushed. So, yeah.
It's interesting. There's a very, very well-known series of books. I won't embarrass this famous author by mentioning the name, but they've been made into very successful films. But I read the first one, the most famous of the books, and I was quite astonished. You expect to see the story arc, and as you say, all the different points along that arc. And for the first 84 pages, I counted, nothing happened. There was no inciting incident until 84 pages in, and I'm afraid I gave up. So I now have to make sure I get a new subscription to the TV channel, which is showing them, so I can see how the film got to be such a success when the book was such a slow burner.
I would guess. Sorry, you finished, but I think I have the answer to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. If you're a discovery writer, there's a sense of having to write up to speed. So you need a bit of a run up to the story. And so this is the 5,000 word rule. I went to a writer's workshop and we'd all taken the first chapter of our novels along. And I happened to be the first person in the circle to be chosen. And the guy said, well, this is very well written, Dave, but it really is a protagonist wandering about trying to find the story. And I went, oh, yeah, it is. And then the person sitting next to me went, oh, that's mine as well. And all the way around, all six of us were going, oh, dear. And the guy said the 5,000 word rule. It's 5,000 words to write up the speed. So take the first 5,000 words and cut them. Oh. So that's what I did. I counted into the story 5,000 words. I kept going until I got to something exciting. And I cut everything before it. Incredibly scary step to do. But it's such a better book because of it.
Yeah, I
think it's good to drop in, backstory and things. You can drip in slowly, but some authors feel they've got to write the whole backstory in the first chapter or two.
That's exactly
I like to try and get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to get the inciting incident in the first chapter, if not on the first page. If I can't do that, I'll at least get the word murder on the first page. Daphne never, expected to make new friends at the U3A. She never expected to learn about a murder. And then hopefully you've got the reader by the throats, But the other interesting thing I keep finding, talking about the story arc, is this new thing. Maybe it's just with cozy crime. There seems to be a continuing secondary arc. I'm thinking for things like Marlowe murder mysteries, there's this continuing mystery about what's happened to Potts's husband. That there's mention of the fact that something dreadful's happened to her husband. And as you go through each program in the series, you never find out what's happened to the husband, but it's still mentioned. And I watched, I forgot the name of it, I'm afraid, this new cozy crime series where the policewoman has three aunties who are always interfering, and we watched it last night.
Yeah,
Something
I've seen
sisters, is it?
adverts
Yeah.
for it. I can't think of it.
Well, that's also got an ongoing story arc. The young policewoman whose three aunties interfere with everything, her mother disappeared when she was a child. And so in every episode, that she's harking back to a happy time she spent with her mother. And the three aunts say, don't let her ask too many questions. So the aunts know what happened to the mother, but they're keeping it from her. So you have this secondary arc. It's nothing to do with the murder the policewoman's investigating, which is different in each episode. But you have this underlying secondary arc, which is a mystery that goes through all of the series. So that seems to be, I don't know if that's a classic thing or whether this is a new idea.
I've got something like that in my Dear and Do Club stories. What happened to the parents? They disappeared on an exploration up the river. And I think that's good to keep teasing, but at some point you have to answer the question. So the book I'm writing at the moment is all about that. I think something like, say, the X-Files. X-Files was fantastic at hinting at the bigger conspiracy.
Yes.
But at some point it becomes a mess because you're not answering the question. And so it gets people's interest, it keeps them going, but you have to answer it because otherwise they get fed up and drop it like a hot potato.
Especially in a standalone.
Was it the identity of the cigarette smoking man or something, wasn't it, in the X-Files? And I can't remember if they ever solved it.
Well, you were fascinated to find out who he was. And then at a point, you just get frustrated that they're not telling you.
You think, I don't care.
Yeah, they lost a lot of viewers because of that, myself included. And then when they finally got around to the episode to explain everything, it was horrendous. It was practically someone standing up with a PowerPoint presentation to explain it all because it made no sense. Because they hadn't thought it through, you know.
I've just Googled the TV series Queens of Mystery.
That's the one, yeah. I don't think it's awfully good, to be honest. We watched it last night because a friend of ours is in it. The actor Ken Bones is somebody my husband worked with in a previous life. And so we watch everything Ken Bones is in. And I thought I must ask him, how did he feel about being in it? Because I thought it was really slow and it has good actors in it, but the script isn't very good, I don't think.
It's amazing, isn't it, how many things we see where you have top actors and it's yes, it's how they act, but a lot of it is this make or break is on the writing.
Yes.
You can almost, I'm sure that you've seen things and you kind of almost cringe for these top actors who've signed up to this thing. They've read the script. As we know, things change from writing novels from first draft to last draft. I'm sure the script has changed, and then you think, oh, these poor actors.
I think scripts get changed more often and more radically because there's less typing involved. They're a lot shorter, what, 20,000 words versus 100,000 words for a novel, let's say.
A minute a page, isn't it, scripts?
Yes, a dreadful layout. I did theatre directing in a previous life, and an actor, you can have good actors with bad material, but they nothing they can do with it really.
Yeah.
Whereas if they've got good material, actors will. I wrote a play called Meeting Disorder, which had a very strong female character, and one of my actor friends said, "That's my part. You dare not give it to anybody else." Right. And she was quite aggressive over it, and I couldn't give it to anybody else because she'd have killed me. So they're desperate for good material, something they can get their teeth into.
And I did the Open University screenwriting course. I thought that was really, really useful, not just for screenwriting, because I've done a couple of screenplays. I send them to Ken Bones, the actor, and he tells me what he thinks of them, which is usually fairly complimentary. But it's very useful in terms of realising how important dialogue is. Because, of course, screenplays are all pretty much dialogue with a smattering of stage direction thrown in.
Cristina, are there films that spring to mind, films or books or TV series that you think are either fantastic, because we're concentrating on plots, but that work really well, or you feel are too dragged out, or And I'm sure we all have books that everybody else has raved about, and or you see the film, you read the book, and you think, what's all the fuss about?
There is one that comes to mind immediately. It's the Angels and Demons, which is
Dan Brown.
famous because of the, it was a major blockbuster, and I did read the book before,
Mm.
and I wasn't really convinced in terms of the book. I didn't really enjoy the book because I thought it was a bit of a repetition of the previous one. I mean, the Da Vinci Code was the sort of, masterpiece. And then that one was, again, the same story, just slightly changed. And I thought it was a bit lazy by the writer to write some. And of course, huge success, but it was a bestseller, and the film as well. But I don't know. It was lacking something for me. It wasn't thrilling enough, and it was a bit unbelievable, to be honest with you. Which you want suspension of disbelief when you write fiction, but I think that particular story went a bit too far.
Who would
Uh,
who would be a go-to for you for books? Who's your not necessarily favorite author, but books that you can really throw yourself into?
I love Ken Follett's novels because
Murphy.
no, not the latest one, the
Okay.
initial thriller ones. I love those.
Mm.
That's actually why I started to write, because I was fed up with him because he went on writing these tomes, and I couldn't finish them because they were a bit boring and a bit long. And so I said, well, I need to do something about it. I want to write a novel that I'd like to read. So that's
Mm.
why actually one of the reasons why I started to write. But his first thrillers were actually very good. And I love thrillers, so that's my problem. And the other one which I really like is Robert Harris. Robert Harris is great. I think
Mm.
they all would make great movies. Unfortunately, the Hollywood treatment of books is not the same. And I know that I've seen, for instance, a couple of movies made out of Ken Follett's books, and they weren't very good.
Right.
And the reason is, because of the script. The script writer has to work with something, but then it's the vision of the director, and finally the one that edits the movie. So how the story is built is not the decision of the writer. Is the decision of these other three people.
Mm.
So, and sometimes there is a discrepancy in terms of quality, I think.
And I think
Um,
also how much something stretched out. I recently saw the Stephen King novel Mr. Mercedes with Brendan Gleeson, Irish actor, who thankfully was still Irish in there. Because how many English and Irish or British actors and actors, um, then put on an American accent. But he was Irish, and Irishman moved to the US. And although I really enjoyed it, I felt it was dragged out a bit too much, that it could have just been a shorter series. And I think with the likes of Netflix and Amazon now producing their own work, it's almost like they've got a book that could be a film, but let's make it into a 6-part TV series instead.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
And so,
sometimes that works though.
um,
Sometimes it needs a
yeah.
bit more length and depth to explore the themes.
Mm.
There is a new one on Netflix called Department Q with
Oh, I
Matthew
love
Good.
that.
That
I
was
love
great,
that with
absolutely
Matthew Good.
great.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
So
Seen
I
it
would.
twice actually.
It's an excellent example how you have an initial plot, and then all of a sudden different characters come in, and they add layer after layer after layer, and you've got a very different story at the end, which is quite amazing. It's quite an exercise. So what I would say in terms of plotting is that the plot, I mean, the one I construct is maybe it's just very simple and very chronological, but then that is the skeleton of the story, and how you tell the story later, you can pick out bits and pieces of this plot and then reshuffle the whole thing and make it into a very interesting story. So starting from the basic plot, my Excel dry scheme is helpful just because then it's you can do a puzzle. Actually, you can move things around, and that's what I like about it, because it doesn't leave any room for error in my case. But then some other people are able to do other things, which is great for them. It's an thank God we are creatives, and so whoever does what, how, it's entirely his choice.
Yes. No, Department Q is a brilliant example because they are a cast of characters. Mick Herron, Slough House, I haven't seen any. I've seen bits of it, but Tim Husband's watching it. And he's read all the books, loves them, loves Gary Oldman as the main character. I can't remember his name now. But a lot of things are about the cast of characters. And Department Q has the three main characters who in the basement, I think it used to be old shower block, are in this really dingy basement where they've got to almost set it up themselves. And they are such interesting characters who work. And yes, each series is a different plot. So you've got from first their meeting and then how they really work well together.
Then you said something really interesting. The office, this particular dingy office, that is another character, if you like. It's the backdrop that needs to be interesting as well. So if you place a story, a thriller like in the Arctic, it has a completely different set of challenges compared, if you put it in an African country. So the setting is really important for a story as well, and will help you to decide which challenges your characters need to face, and the motivation and their ability. So it's another important element in any original work.
Yeah. Denise, going from books you've read or films you've seen and TV series, is there the good and bad for you?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking as you were all speaking about Broadchurch. I keep meaning to find out, was that based on a novel, and if so, who wrote it rather? Because I thought that was the most disappointing ending I've ever come across. I got the strong feeling that the whoever wrote the plot didn't know at the beginning who the murderer was going to be, and they'd got to the very end and they'd explored all the possibilities, and they suddenly decided to make the murderer the policewoman's husband. And then because it's so long since I've seen it.
Spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry about that, but it's years since it's been on, hasn't it? So I'm sure you've all seen it. But the thing is, I couldn't see, thinking back, why I wasn't completely aware at the time of why the policewoman's husband did kill the young chap, the young boy. And I keep thinking I must go and watch it again and see, have I missed something?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of times, and it was a very weak reason why.
I have to disagree with both of you, because that was going to be my example of good and bad writing.
Oh, really?
I found Broadchurch absolutely gripping. Both the two seasons I've seen, I've not seen the third season yet. So don't tell me the ending of that one.
I don't know if I have either, actually.
Well, you see, I found that gripping. And then Chris Chibnall went on to do a season of Doctor Who, a couple of seasons of Doctor Who, and his was disappointing.
Oh.
I mean, I was trying to think, well, why was his writing gripping in one thing and less so in the other? And he was involved in the show running of both, so really you can't blame it on somebody taking the story and doing it badly, as it were.
Because I suppose Broadchurch is from, I've just Googled it wasn't based on a book, that it was his own creation, whereas Doctor Who, you a bit like picking up collaborating with a James Patterson, you have the mold that you're then fitting into. Whether he felt he had limitations, I don't know.
I suppose so, but Doctor Who is one of those programs that has no limitations at all as to what you can do. You've just got to have a story that this person turns up in the Doctor turns up somewhere random, does
Yeah,
the story, he leaves. That's it. That's
yeah,
the only
yeah.
criteria you really have to follow.
Yeah.
I think one of the worst endings, and it's often quoted, isn't it, as is the awful Hand of God ending, and it's in The Wizard of Oz, where the whole story is how will the character and Toto the dog actually ever get back to Kansas, and the Wizard of Oz lets them down. He turns out to be a horrible person, and then at the end, this witch that has never appeared anywhere before suddenly appears and says, "Oh, I'll give you a lift on my broomstick." And that's a real hand of God. They just dropped this character in who said, I'll take you home, be all
But
right.
the witch did appear at the start of the film, and it was the ruby slippers that she had all the time that she could have just clicked together and got home.
That's true.
So
But
this-
did she appear at the beginning? I thought those were two different witches.
No, there were two sisters. One of the witches was killed by a house, and the other one explains what Dorothy's got to do, and then off she goes. And then the witch turns up at the end to go, "Oh, it was all right in the end."
I just
Sorry,
wish it
I'm
had a bit
arguing
more meat in it.
details. I'm arguing details, and I shouldn't. But your point is that that's a Deus Ex Machina, and it is very bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so.
There's a Stephen King. I was self-brought up in Stephen King, and I blame him for me wearing glasses because I'd read the books underneath the duvet when I should be asleep with a torch, Firestarter and Christine, and that era. So I was really looking forward to seeing this film called Secret Window with Johnny Depp. And I won't say what happened at the end, but it's one of these ones that if you write back in the day when you could write short stories for various magazines in print, and there were various things you couldn't have as endings. So you couldn't have a twin. I say whenever I read a twin, I think, oh, okay, here we go. And so you have to really, if you've got twins in your book, you have to really make it something special. Twins for the character to end up being an animal, for it all to be a dream, and so on and so forth. And it was one of those. So that was disappointing.
Yeah.
What did I put as my?
You have a question about writing yourself into a corner
Yes.
you can't get out of.
Yes. Well, I nearly did with that one, because with this one for the road, because I came up with the idea. Well, on the back. Yep. It says, panicked at killing a man on a country road, drunk driver Liam Ross buries the body in the woods. When Liam returns, the body has disappeared. So I set myself up thinking, oh, that's really good. Now what happens? And luckily, because the book exists, I managed to work out what happened next. But David, have you written yourself into a corner?
Well, I was going to advise people to write themselves into a corner.
Okay.
If your protagonist has so many problems that you don't necessarily know how to get out of, and then I think that drives your creativity. I remember writing Crossing the Bridge, and I had a plot worked out what had to happen to him, and my character started to get very resourceful and started to solve problems I was just chucking at him, not knowing what was going to happen. It was one of those things where it just wrote itself, and my character would do something, and I go, part of me would think, why has he just done that? That makes no sense. And then 2 pages further on, oh, that's why you did that. This does. Do
you ever find that you might get stuck and at night and then think, okay, I'll come back to this in the morning, and then your brain has carried on overnight, and you come back in the morning and go,
yeah. Bob Shaw,
all the time.
Yeah, Bob Shaw, the great Irish writer, talks about that, and he used to inform the pixies in his head to go and sort it out, and then he'd have the solution. They'd have the solution for him the next day.
I like that idea.
That's why I have a notebook and pen by the side of the bed, because I often wake up in the morning and my plot has worked itself out in my head in the night. And I think if I don't write it down before I come down, let the dog out, have a cup of tea, it'll go.
Again. It's funny because some authors, I can't think of who they are. Minette Walters, I think, was one. P.D. James is another, where they stop mid-sentence so that their brains can then carry on. So when they finish their session for that day, they don't stop at a natural point. They literally stop in the middle of a sentence.
It's a way to get you going in the next day, because you
Yeah.
just think, oh, I'll just finish that sentence, and then you're off again. Yeah.
Cristina.
Well, because I'm a plotter, I never got myself into a corner really, because I just plot it in order not to get into that position. But what I want the reader to feel is that any of my protagonists end up in a corner, so that actually, I make the story so that it looks like they are in deep trouble and in mortal peril. And then you pick up later to solve the problem. But no, I think that in order not to end up in a corner, I would suggest to write an outline, a plan, which is what I do. So thankfully, no.
There was a Doctor Who series back in William Hartnell's days, or so, which was written by two writers, and they alternated writing an episode, and it became a challenge to come up with a cliffhanger that the other writer couldn't get the Doctor out.
That's sneaky. It's like me playing a squash with a former lodger of mine, and I used to whack it in the corner. Drove him nuts.
I don't think I've written myself into a corner, but I did write myself onto a precipice once, because I'd written one of my espionage thrillers. I really loved the story, and I'd rattle through to the end. And a good friend of mine, sadly now departed, the late Jeff Gudgeon, he agreed to read it for me. Sorry?
I didn't know he was no longer with us.
Oh, sadly, yes, he passed away last year, but I think it was last year. But yeah, no, he read this and he said, "Oh yes, I love this story too." He said the only thing is it's a bit too short. You've not got enough of a story. And I went away and I thought, how can I lengthen this without making it look as though I've tagged bits on? I didn't want to just tack things on at the end. And then I suddenly realised that what the basis of the story was. It was about a man who worked for GCHQ who was using things that he heard to blackmail people. And then I killed him off. And then I realised I had to keep the story going. And I thought, well, supposing somebody stumbles across this crime that he's been doing, this fraud, and they decide to take it on. And that's what happened. And it did actually work quite well.
And what happened to that? Did you have you got things? Because I've got loads of things that I've started and may or may not finish. But there are some things I've written I think I'll probably never do anything with this. It just won't work from what I've got so far. Have you got how many works in progress do you have, Denise?
Oh, I've got two espionage thrillers. I've plotted out, and having published two cozy crime books, I've plotted out another 11. And I'm writing two of them at the same time at the moment, mainly because I get a bit bored and I move over to something else.
Yeah.
And I've got two true crime books I'm researching. I have to have lots of projects on the go because I'll come to, I never get writer's block, but I come to a crossroads and I think I can't decide which way to go. So I'll go and sleep on it and then maybe spend a few days writing something else. And then suddenly the fairies work and they say, "Oh, that book you're writing, you've got to do so-and-so with that."
That's the same place I'm in. I'm in the same place. And I'm doing 7 novels, and it's a stupid place to be. I've just got to say, I'm spread too thin. I've got to finish things.
I think that Francis has a question as well.
Yes.
Okay. I was just going to ask you, Cristina, and then we'll come back to David. And thank you, Francis, for the question in the chat. Cristina, you say you're working on the next book. Have you got other ones that have been in the background, written down, or?
I've got ideas. So I wrote down just the sort of initial sentence, what the story needs to be. And then I will have to go and do the research before attempting to write anything, just because I want. And I think that the research is also incredibly important because you may not know of things or situations that people face at the time. And that gives you another little mini story to add to your story. So that part for me is also fundamental because, in the 40s, for instance, did people use cars because there was no petrol, for instance? or were taxis available? What was the situation of trains? How did people move from one place to another? So all these is actually a challenge. Because if you don't have something, you have to come up with something else, and it can shows also how your characters is resourceful. So that's why I have ideas, because and ideas can come from anywhere really. But at least I've got some placeholders and say this is the story I want to develop in this particular era, and another one. But at the moment I plotted out one novel, and I'm working on that. I can't work on more than one at a time, simply because,
It's
as
funny,
I
isn't
said
it?
before,
Because I write crime and women's fiction. I like having the variety, so that, like Denise, if I get stuck or get to a certain point, because if I know bits later on, I'll just put more here and then go to the later bits. But if I've done all that, then I think, okay, I fancy a change, and I'll go off and do another genre, or pull up a work in progress, of which there are many. But there are others who just know, I want to work on this one. Yes, I've got ideas. I must write them down, because otherwise I'll forget. I have a terrible memory. But yeah, I think, as we've all said at some point in this, that we do what works for us.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, if you're going to be like me and you've got about 50 starts, you're never going to end up publishing anything. David, we have a question for you in the.
Yes, I was going to say I've been distracted by Francis's question in the chat.
Yeah.
Uh,
Would you like to read it out and answer it?
well, Francis says, from my own experience, I'm stuck in the soggy middle. I know where I need to go, but the route's very elusive. I think it was David who mentioned a roadmap. I don't think I said roadmap. And then there's an argument about whether I should have a capital D. And then she says, so how do you find your way out of an endless bog in the fog without a torch or a compass, just a sketch map?
You may have mentioned roadmap in one of the books you gave us an example.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm a puzzler, so I would suggest if you're stuck in the soggy middle, stop writing it. Put a little big note in red, must sort out soggy middle, and then write something you want to write, rather than start to write tedious stuff because you're feeling stuck. But that does mean you end up with lots of notes in red that you've got to then sort out. I currently have 53 in my work in progress. I mean, maybe if it's a soggy middle, maybe you shouldn't write it that way. Maybe it's a dull idea. Maybe another murder is needed. I don't know.
Well, don't they say to introduce another man or have a man walk in with a gun? If you need another inciting incident, you create a new character and have them produce a gun.
But that can also make no sense at all, can it?
Yeah. If it's not a crime novel.
Is there a general purpose solution to this? Often, people are talking about this. You say, well, what is the problem specifically? What is the book you're writing? A general purpose solution would be to, skip it, leave a note, and then hopefully the little pixies in your brain will come up with an answer.
Yeah.
Or stick something more exciting in.
I've got a question for Francis, actually, whether you've written, because as I mentioned earlier on, that when I'm going through a novel, I will write just a paragraph summarising each chapter, and which obviously when I get sent books to edit, they are a complete book from start to finish. But I do the same with my book, and also Cristina mentioned at the top of the programme, top of the session, about being able to answer all the questions, the how, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So if you've got answers to all of those questions, it may help.
So you're doing the snowflake method backwards. You write a chapter and then you write the paragraph summary.
It's, both, one or the other.
Yeah.
One or the other. I tend to prefer, because I'm more of a pantser than a plotter, so I tend to prefer to write and then summarise it.
I use headers and subheaders for sections, and then you can automatically generate a contents page, which is a summary of your book.
Mm.
And then you put a plot outline next to that, and when your plot outline agrees with your content summary, you're finished.
And
Because
also,
you're allowed to change both.
yeah, no, absolutely. And because I do this timeline, some of the authors I work with don't have synopses. So because I've just created the timeline for them from start to finish, it won't be exactly obviously the synopsis, but then that helps them build one. I have scenes, but not yet an outline for every chapter. I think I'm going to try a spreadsheet. Woo!
Yeah.
Yes.
Mathematic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you can do graphs and all sorts.
You can do a grid. I mean, a simple grid will do. And it for me, it's a peace of mind of having on one piece of paper the whole story. And I can see that if a chapter is too dull, then I have to work around it. So it's a good way to give your characters a challenge. If you think about a journey, if you go from Canterbury to Rome on foot, then you will have to find a boat to cross the channel. And then what do you find on the other side? Is there anybody helping you? So you can add people and places and challenges and obstacles and problems and thieves that can kill you or pose a threat. So it's actually a roadmap is a good example of what it could be. That kind of plot in a nutshell.
Mm. And Word has tables, so you don't have
Absolutely.
to use Excel. You can
Yeah. Excel is a
insert.
bit
It's odd that I'm definitely a person who uses Word. I wouldn't want to go to Scrivener, but Excel is better than a Word table. It's certainly easier to add things to it.
yeah. It's a
Table
bit
can be a bit of a
more
nightmare trying
flexible.
to insert rows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The one thing we did, James and I, when we were writing this fantasy story together, it had a huge cast of characters, absolutely enormous cast of characters.
Yeah.
So we color coded the background for each of their little one-line summaries, so that if you looked at it from a distance, you could see, oh yeah, this character's doing a lot. Oh, not doing anything for quite a long time. Right, that's a problem. Just visually, not even reading what's written in it.
Yeah, that's important because you can also identify where, chapter where you have action and where you have just a description or, taking, the characters from one place to another. So you can alternate and have a good pace as well.
Yeah, it depends on the story you're writing as to what you need to
Absolutely.
put into it. It just so happened that this was important to us, and the rewrite of the second book, we have a problem with the hero doesn't appear for quite a while at the start, and that needs sorting out.
Denise, you've written so many books. How do you keep track of your characters' names? Because I have a nerdy Excel spreadsheet, and I have about probably 4,000 different names from A to Z. So I have one for boys, one for girls, and one for places. And every time and then in the columns at the top, I have the book or the story because I write a lot of short stories. And so if I'm going to put them in things like these two, then I have to make sure that I'm using different names. Otherwise, if somebody reads the entire collection, they go, oh, was that Joanne from then or so on? How do you keep track of all the character names you use?
Well, again, it's a box file, index card.
Oh,
Excuse
yes.
me, I'm cough again.
Yeah.
It's got a dry spot there. Yeah, I have to have the box file because one thing I'm wary about is using the same name. I try not, particularly first names. I don't want to have two Andrews in the same novel, or basically perhaps not even in the same series, because people reading them might get mixed up. But the index card system works very well for me, and the cards are in there alphabetically. One section is characters, another is locations, because I'm yes.
Well, I have a
that's
whole
ideal.
drawer. I have IKEA cubes here, and I have a whole drawer full. They're all empty, pretty much empty, but I have a whole drawer of A to Zs, and I plan at some point to use them like this. But then, if I go anywhere, so we're going to Spain in May, I'd have to take them with me, whereas I tend to have them on a laptop. Yeah, I think whatever works, as long as you're consistent and avoid any duplication.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, with my cozy crime series, because I'm writing about real people. For example, a good friend of mine who does appear in the book, her name is Kate Trotman, so she's recognised herself in the book. She's Kitty Walker. The name of the character was inspired by her name,
Yeah.
and another lady whose surname is a town in the Lake District. The character based on her is the surname is another town in the Lake District,
Oh,
and that's how I tend to remember them. But yeah, it is hard to keep track and particularly write things in, like if somebody gets killed off. I'm just about to kill off a favourite minor character. It's a lady who has appeared in the first two books in the series, and unfortunately, she's got a touch of dementia, which in some way adds a little light relief because she does come out with things that are quite funny. She's just got herself a new computer which has all the Belgian whistles,
right.
because
Oh,
she doesn't understand the phrase,
yeah,
things like that. But
yeah,
I decided that she was a good candidate to be a murder victim, so
yeah.
she won't be in the box file for much longer.
Oh. Well, I remember I'm an old school watcher of EastEnders. Haven't seen it for years, but there was a character there called Ethel who had her dog Willie. So it was Ethel and her Willie. And I remember there was one scene, you can search for it on YouTube. There's one scene where Charlie Cotton had been hit by a car and died, and she comes rushing in, and Sharon, I think, is still behind the bar and gets her a brandy, and and they say, oh, whatever's, and people are crowding around her, and they say, oh, whatever's happened, and she says, oh, it's Charlie, he's been decreased on the M25. And of course, she means deceased. He's deceased. But she says she's, because she was always, and that was her character trait. And she was adorable and memorable all these years on from
I've
music.
got a character who's a bit of a Mrs. Malaprop, Betty, and she does come out with things like that. And she says that poor old Esme, this character I mentioned, she's got that dimension, she's suffering
Oh,
from dimension.
yeah.
And I find that great fun because I have my late sister-in-law was a real Mrs. Malaprop, and I've got a whole book of her funny sayings. She couldn't eat seafood because she'd once got muscle bound. It's little things like that where she's completely misunderstood phrases. And I find that kind of thing is quite, because you have to have humour when you're killing people, I think. And it's particularly true with cozy crime. It's got to be kept light. There's going to be no sex, no horrible swearing, and all the violence tends to happen off the page. So putting a bit of humour in gives another dimension to it.
David, how do you keep track of your characters? And final word, because we have been going on
Oh
an hour
yes.
and two and a half.
Well, my fan did an Excel spreadsheet. And he's got a thing in one column, notes on it, and then little sort of codes for which book it came from. So
Okay.
EOD for Empire of the Dead. That's his system, and that's the system therefore that I use.
Yeah.
Which sounds incredibly lazy, getting someone else to do it for me. But effectively, it needs to be color coded though. Empire of the Dead should be a different color from Year of the Chrononauts. I'm just looking at it now.
Well, that gives you something to do for the rest of the afternoon.
Oh no, I'll probably work out how to do a conditional rule. But yes, it would waste
Yeah,
it.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, autofill. I love the another thing about Excel is that it will look out for duplicates. So I'm quite often doing that in Excel, find the things I've got in twice and don't need.
Yeah, this spreadsheet, now I look at it, it's not in alphabetical order at all.
Right.
It's in a random order from when he came up with it, I suppose.
Right. Oh well, you can sort and filter.
Sort and filter. Yeah, it needs a lot of work to be really useful.
Right.
But
to be weak.
Let's be honest here. It was very useful, so I'm very grateful for it.
And what a fan to have.
Yeah,
A reader
yes,
to
indeed.
have.
Yeah.
So final word, David, from you and your puzzling and plotting and advice.
Read up about the hero's journey. And if anybody ever says I don't want to write formulaically, ignore them because they don't know what they're talking about.
Okay. Cristina.
Well, I think that this has been really fascinating, and in my opinion, well, what I do with my characters is actually, putting in a spreadsheet and giving them names and then a description, so that I don't forget who they are. Because if you think that you read a novel in a matter of days, but you write it in a matter of months. So by the time we finish writing, you say, "Oh, what color was the hair of that particular chap?" And I don't want to miss it. So that's what I do. Where I get together all my cast of characters. I just I'm particularly picky about names. But then Excel spreadsheet it is again.
Mm. See, one thing I've picked up on, there was one novel I was editing a while back, and I think about 8 characters all had blonde hair or grey hair tied back. And I think once you catalogue them, because as you say, you're spending so long writing the book
Yeah.
that you do lose track of exactly of specifics. And then when I'm coming to it, when it takes me a couple of days to just listen to it, so I send it to my Kindle, to listen to it and catalogue everything, it makes it so much more obvious.
I've written a program to do that. So in Word, if I press a particular function key, it'll, whatever word the cursor is on, it will look this up for me and pop up and tell me this person has blonde hair or whatever.
Right.
We are becoming all techies.
Yeah, which would be fantastic if I actually filled it in more efficiently.
I was going to say, it never surprises me when David says I've written a program.
Well, yeah, if you're doing anything repetitive on a computer, like looking something up, get the computer to do it.
No, exactly. Wonderful. Denise, thank you so much. Cristina, thank you. Lovely to have you here, your first one. And David, thank you as always. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to Sally, who had to leave early, sadly, before we could get a question. And Francis, who's gone for lunch or had to go back to work. I think Sally had to have lunch. And as we do all, I'm hungry.
I could do with lunch, yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Morgen.
See you soon. You're very welcome. See you soon.